Hello book fighters, it's Sunday, April 24th, and last week I read A Separate Peace by John Knowles. So I apologize that I wasn't able to get a video up on Thursday. I had friends come in to the States, and I thought I was going to be going down to visit them on Friday, but I actually ended up going Thursday, and it kind of switched last minute, so I wasn't able to make a video that day. I didn't even have my computer with me when I was down there, so, but I got home last night, and so I'm bringing it to you now. And actually, I was in Tampa at the same time as Julia, so we were so close, but we didn't even know. So I had to read A Separate Peace my sophomore year of English, and it's sort of like this defining book for me, like for that full year, because I could tell that it was obviously our English teacher's favorite book, because we had this like thick packet that we had to do on it, and it was like the book for the whole year. So it's sort of like that's one of the things that defined my sophomore year for me. But I realized that I didn't really remember the book at all, and I saw it in the bookstore, and I was like, hey, that's something I should read. I did know how it ended when I started reading it, but I couldn't remember any of the details, so that was kind of an interesting experience, because I could see all of the foreshadowing and all of the references where we were told over and over again exactly what was going to happen, and every little reference I was like, I know how this ends. But it was a wonderful book. Actually one of my favorites that I have read, that I've read through Book Fighters, and I know I said that last week, but I've just been reading a lot of good books recently. For me, when I read this one, it was just so clear for me in my mind. Like, I could just see it so clearly, and I could relate so immediately with the characters, not necessarily because they were experiencing things I had experienced. It was just sort of the personality of the characters and the way it was written. It was just so accessible for me. It was just so clear in my mind that it was so easy to read and like feel all the momentum of it, which is something that you don't really get with a lot of books. And I don't know if that would be the case for everyone who read this. There are probably some people who like pick it up and they're like, snooze, most boring book I've ever read. But for me, it was wonderful to have found it again and to have loved it. I kind of feel like it shows such a clear space in between when I read it the first time and barely understood what was going on, and I think I might have scraped a C on that packet, to now when I read it and it just is all so wonderful and beautiful and connected to me. I think it is an interesting mile marker, and I didn't expect there to be that much of a difference, because I've reread books that I've read in high school before and not felt that same space between the two. But I loved it so much that I looked up my sophomore year English teacher on Facebook, and we became friends on there, and I haven't quite gotten up the courage to say anything to her yet, but I do kind of want to hear her thoughts on this book, because she was one of my best teachers that I ever had. She was one of the hardest teachers I'd ever had, and not by any stretch of the imagination a soft-hearted, kind teacher, but by far the best teacher I had all through high school. Questions. So Sarah's question was, do our favorite characters tend to have things in common? More or less was the question. And I would say they definitely have a lot of similar personality traits. I think that I'm definitely drawn to a particular kind of character. Like, my three favorite characters out of anything in the entire world ever are Veronica Mars, John Shepard from Stargate Atlantis, and Batman. And then the two on retainer, I haven't decided if they're favorites yet. I haven't loved them for quite long enough, are Katniss Everdeen and Dexter. And I think they all have kind of the similar sardonic edge to their personality. They're all kind of highly intelligent, but all kind of loners as well, and very dry ways of speaking and senses of humor. Batman's a little outside of that path, but not a whole lot. So yeah, I would say that they're definitely very similar. But I think that makes sense in a lot of ways, because there are particular traits that you can relate to, possibly because you see a bit of yourself reflected in them, part of it because maybe that's something that you aspire towards, or just a way of presenting things in a way that you find interesting, or you have similar senses of humor, or something like that. So I think it makes sense that your favorite characters would be quite alike each other. Like, generally speaking, someone whose favorite character in anything is Veronica Mars is not probably going to love Bella Swan from Twilight. So I don't think anyone else had a question for this week. I know Dan didn't, neither did Lauren, neither did Julia. Okay, no one else had a question this week, so I'm going to ask you one. When you read, do you have a very, like, eidetic sense of the story? Like, when you read it, do you see everything that's happened played out in front of you like a stage? Or do you see yourself in the place of the main character? Or do you experience it like you hear voices and you feel feelings, but you don't necessarily see it in your mind? Just what is your experience mentally when you're reading? How do you see the story play out? For me personally, I don't generally see things play out like a stage performance or anything. I can see something very clearly as it's being described. Like, I'll have a very significant image of a character or of a place, but I don't necessarily see them walking around doing things. I tend to experience them more with, like, direct sensory analyses, or I'll relate to the way someone is thinking, so I'll get into their thought process, and then I can see specific images very clearly, but it doesn't really play out as a movie would, generally. So next week I will be reading P.S. Your Cat is Dead by James Kirkwood, I think. It's the same guy that wrote A Chorus Line. I actually have already started it because I finished a separate piece on Wednesday, so you know how it goes. So you'll see me later this week on Thursday with any luck, and Dan, I will see you tomorrow.